Welcome to the latest edition of the Shukri Wrights podcast with your host, Shukri Wrights. It's been a crazy year to say the least. Happy New Year to all of you, wherever you may be, however you may be listening and now watching on YouTube. Always appreciated. I am very excited and happy to have back my good friend who is back with a podcast for the second time, first time since spring 2020. That's former NHLer and NHL alumni Cam Connor who joins the podcast today. How are you doing, Mr. Connor?
I'm doing good, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. A happy New Year to you and yours. Man, I still have to grasp the fact that it's 2021 now, and the last time that we spoke was, believe it was May of 2020.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And tell me how much has changed on your end, if at all, between the last time we spoke on the podcast and now.
Well, I could go in a number of directions with that query.
Sure.
One, we all know COVID's changed the world, not just
Mm-hmm.
our country or your country. It's changed the world, and there's been a lot of adjustments from people losing jobs, laid off, to working at home. It's the world's done a 360 since we last talked.
Yeah.
And plus, for myself, I am now retired from working the 9 to 5 life. It wasn't my
Wow.
choosing. The company I worked for, even though I was their leading sales guy, I did $54 million in sales the last 3 or 4 years. They just tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're done on Friday, and we'll give you a severance." And so I said, "I guess this is my cue to retire."
Wow. Well, number one, I'm
So,
sorry to hear that. I
oh,
mean, like,
it's life, right?
yeah, yeah, but like, I mean, that's been the story for so many people in 2020,
Yes.
in which that, hey, you're done. We're not bringing you back, and my heart really does go out to people, but but for you, um, it's an accomplishment when you are when you've accomplished so much in your life, whether it be professionally as hockey and even away from hockey, that I just get the sense that you seem to have a feeling or an aura of contentment. Is that right, or am I wrong?
I had my own plan, going into retirement. I'm 66 years old.
Hmm.
In August, I'll be 67, and I'm probably the most immature guy at 66-year-olds you're going to meet because I sure don't think like 66. And, I had a vision of, I'd been with this company for 10 years, and again, I was doing great. And they came as a little bit of a surprise that
Mm,
my destiny was determined by somebody else, because in my mind I was going to work till the end of 2020, maybe end of 2021.
mm,
And that was in my head. And so again, when they tap you on the shoulder and said you're done by the end of the week, thank you very much, and that's it. That was a little bit of an adjustment.
yeah.
So I haven't really gone out and looked to get back into the field. In my mind, I say, at my age, not many people are going to hire somebody during the COVID, and
Mm,
everybody's being laid off, including myself. So I just decided that, okay, I guess maybe that's my cue to start my retirement a little earlier than what I was thinking. So,
yeah.
you know, if you're a lot younger than me and you're laid off and you can't find a job, my heart goes out to those people. So my situation, wasn't as bad as maybe some individuals have it. So I don't feel sorry for myself. But just like in hockey, I was hoping to retire on my terms, and they just tell you one day you're not getting a contract. See you later, and it's no different than 9 to 5 life. Somebody else controls you, and they say, "Okay, you're done." So you just learn to adjust.
Now, before we started doing the podcast recording, you were telling me such a fascinating story between you and the Hockey Hall of Famer, the late Gordie Howe, that I said, you know what, I really want you to share this story with the audience on the podcast. So tell me about the time that you and Mr. Gordie Howe went to go see one particular hockey movie. You may have heard of it, called The Slapshot. Tell me about it.
Yes, sir, that is correct. And the reason I brought it up in the first place is yesterday my son and I spent 2 hours, the you know I do a podcast. It's called View from the Penalty Box.
Yes.
And so my son said, we got to do Slapshot. You got to comment. I said, that's 2 hours, man. Who's going to listen for 2 hours? But it actually, for us, it went by pretty quick. We were watching the movie Slapshot.
Mhm.
And, the first time I watched it was when it came out. It came out, I believe, 1977.
Yeah.
And I was playing in that rival league to the NHL. It was called the World Hockey Association.
Mm.
And I was playing with Gordie Howe with the Houston Aeros. And we were on the road in Edmonton. And the movie had just come out. And Gordie and I were talking. He said, let's go see the movie Slapshot. I said, I'm in. So, we went to the theater. We each got ourselves a large bucket of popcorn, and we sat there, and we were watching Slapshot. And, it's no different than when I watched the Gordie Howe movie with Mark and Marty and Gordie's wife, Colleen, and, played by actors. And, knowing the real people and their mannerisms and the way they think, I didn't really appreciate the movie that I was watching. And having played the game of hockey at all different levels,
Mhm.
and the way the players were portrayed, off ice, in their hotel room, playing with trucks and cars on their bed, they just looked like 9-year-olds. And so, there was some of that part that was a little disgusting to me. It must have hurt my pride and Gordie's pride. Say, come on, man, that's just not the way it is. So my son said, let's put a podcast together and you could narrate it. And one of the things I did notice is, if you look at the NHL players today and hockey players on the whole, the equipment that they wear, it's state of the art, man. The shoulder pads, like all the equipment, the skates is so much better than when I played. So in the movie Slapshot, they show the guys in the dressing room, and you should take a look at the equipment that these guys have to put on.
Wow.
There is zero protection. It's actually almost funny, and it's a lot heavier, the equipment, because I remember when I always wondered how much the equipment weighed, so I didn't wear a helmet, and so I got undressed, no clothes on, got on the scale, weighed myself, and then I put all my hockey gear on, including my skates. I didn't have my stick in my hand, and I didn't wear a helmet, and I got on the scale, and the equipment that we wore back in those days was 22 pounds.
Wow.
And so I would just guess that today, if somebody was to do that and get on the scale, I don't think, because those pants, those hockey pants we used to wear, damn, those things were heavy. And they used to have suspenders. So you wear suspenders over your shoulders supporting those pants. And then when the Swedes came over, they said, what are you guys wearing suspenders for? It puts all the weight on your shoulders and upper body. And they were a little smarter than us. They just wore belts. So we got rid of suspenders and we put belts, which put the weight around your hips. And so, anyways, the equipment, it's come a long way. And, I still have my old equipment. I don't know if it's worth anything, but I got all my old equipment, that's for sure.
I mean, just hearing that the equipment weighed 22 pounds in itself is like, wait. And it just gives me even more admiration and just respect that I have for hockey players, because you're skating full speed with 22 pounds of equipment. Now, I played football, and I can never understand fully what it's like to skate full speed with 22 pounds of equipment. And the fact that you even like weighted is amazing in its own right, which leads me to wonder how does a hockey player like condition himself to such a great extent while ensuring that the equipment that he wears does not affect his performance on the ice?
Well, I would say this, what a big difference is when you get to do an optional practice at a pro level. You could go on the ice without equipment on. The guys always wore two pieces of equipment. They didn't wear a helmet. They wore a jock, protect something very valuable.
Yeah.
And elbow pads. Those are the only two that we had to wear. It was mandatory. But, when you start off as a little kid, the equipment you put on, it's got zero weight to it. And you just, year after year, every time you just put that equipment on, So, if you always skated your whole life without equipment and one day they said you got to wear 22 pounds worth, it would be a major adjustment. But again, when we would go on the ice without equipment, you go, man, am I ever fast out here? Look how fast I can skate without 22 pounds on. Like it was a big difference, right? With and without. But it's just something that you always have to wear it, so it just kind of grows with you from a 6, 7-year-old right through your life. So you don't really even think about it once you get it on. But if you look at a lot of the athletes and hockey players, their thighs are pretty damn big from
Yeah,
supporting that. So they've got huge thighs for sure.
which is astonishing because when I remember the first time like watching like videos, just plain old videos on NHL.com and like players training, and I noticed it's like for by and large part, a lot of the players have some really sturdy like legs, like especially like the thigh area where that's your power base, where you that's where you generate most of your power. And
Yes.
like if in fact for you, in fact, I think this is actually a perfect segue going into the NHL now in the restarting phase, getting ready for the 2020-2021 season, which is officially starting on January 13th. Training camps are opening up. Now, what was your method of training during the offseason in preparation for an NHL season?
Well, that's a good question. Back in my day, um, they didn't really have anybody, on the payroll with the NHL, or even junior hockey that would say to you, this is how you should train in the off season.
Mhm.
Um, I kind of tried to keep up on it. I know some people that went to Russia, excuse me, to study the Russian because they were great skaters. They were unbelievable in the 70s. Um, and so there was things to learn. So they went to Russia and they studied the Russians and they talked to people. So they came back and I'd pick their brain. What do they do? And so they gave me some of the training things that they did. And one of them was they said, if you want stronger ankles, you get an old pair of your skates and do them up in the summertime and run all over your grass. I said, really?
Wow.
So I put skates on and I would be running around my yard, and I'm sure the neighbors would go, "What the hell is he doing?" And you gotta jump over your sidewalk and land on the other side, and
Oh
so
gosh.
so you kind of did what you thought, and a lot of the things that I did as I look back was really not very productive,
Mm.
and so the best things that I found that was doing wind sprints because hockey's a game of stops and starts. And so if you get out there and you do 40-yard dashes, 50 yards, and you do a lot of wind sprints, that was very productive. And I remember when I was in the World Hockey Houston Aeros and the team folded, and I am now going to play for the Montreal Canadiens. And again, nobody told me a thing about here's the proper way to train. So every day in my mind, I would go to it was a golf course, and it was to go to run around the outside of the golf course was just over 5 miles.
Wow.
And every day, so I don't know if you've been to Houston, but in the summertime, it's 100% humidity at 12 noon. It is freaking hot. So I
Oh
said to
man.
myself, okay, if
Mm.
I go out there and I work harder than anybody else, wait till training camp, I'm gonna be proud of myself. And I pushed myself every single day in the summertime. I went out and I did long distance running in the heat. And when I got to Montreal, like I thought for sure when I'm on the inside and it's cool, I'll have so much energy. It actually what happened to me is I used to have a pretty good build because I used to work out with the weights and box with my buddies and you do push-ups all the time. But I kind of got away from it that summer. And when I went to camp, I kind of looked in the mirror and I had a build like a long distance runner. So
Wow.
you got tall and thin. I didn't have the muscles I used to have. And when I got on the ice, the long distance training, yeah, I had good wind, but it was the wind sprints and other things that, I should have been doing. So I learned a real hard lesson that kind of put me behind the eight ball in the year that I wanted to do the best I could to represent myself. And so as it went along, and I'm with the Rangers, they did give us a book, which I still got. It's like a pamphlet type book
Mm.
talking about, what you should be doing in the off season. And they actually, if you took a look at a hockey player's body after the summer, okay, you get the summer to recharge your batteries and you could work out. And so if you took a picture of a hockey player coming to training camp, he's in good shape, he's got muscles, looks good. But when I played with Montreal, we played in about 6, 7 months, 116 games when
Mm.
we won the cup. And that works out to 3 to 4 games a week, not including all your travel, not including your practices,
Wow.
not including the coaches. There's some variables they can't control with the player, but they can all control conditioning. So they work you like a dog on the ice. And if they took a picture of your body at the end of the season, it looked like you just got out of a concentration camp. Your body was
Wow.
so skinny and beat up, the muscles just weren't there, and you needed that summer. But with the Rangers, they give you 5 days off. That was it. Enjoy yourself, enjoy your summer. And then they give you this program, which, my Lord, you start 5 days after the season's over. And it wasn't, let's just work up to a level. It was like right off the bat,
Mm.
work your ass off, like wind sprints. And you gotta
Wow.
do wind sprints and then go slow for 10 seconds and then turn it on again. And it was hard work. So I don't know what the guys got going for them today, but I do know because it's a business hockey today and they got everybody on the payroll. I mean, they feed you right after practice, right? So the single
Yeah.
guys we used to go out and eat or drink or whatever we used to do. Now they go into like the Oilers, you should see their dressing room. It's second to none. So when you walk by, they got like, if you ever walk into a hotel lobby and they got it's like wide open space with couches and
Yep.
when you walk into Oilers dressing room and it's just like that. It's got a fireplace you can see from anywhere within the training room area. They
Wow.
got like a restaurant in there where there's somebody feeding you guys every day and they got a weight room, they got an indoor hockey rink. Like it's right in your dressing room. And so these guys are really taken care of to say, hey, you concentrate on doing well on the ice. We'll take care of everything else. So they've got the trainers that we never had back in my day. So these guys are a lot more in tune with the things you should and shouldn't be doing. And we always learn the hard way.
Now, I don't know what it is, but it seems like you always hear about this later, in which that there's always that one or two players that show up to training camp overweight or out of shape. During your playing career, do you have any stories or memories of whether if it was yourself or a teammate of yours who came to training camp and was rather out of shape and it showed up pretty quickly on day one of training camp?
Well, there's a couple stories that I remember. I remember with the Oilers. There was one guy who was a defenseman who you saw him the year before, and he was just average, decent sized defenseman. The next year you see him, holy cow, the muscles on him, and in the game of hockey, honest to God, when I played, I didn't know anybody that ever used steroids because hockey's a
Mm.
game of reactions, and you can't, you hear about them in other sports.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So like in football, maybe if you're, and I'm making this up, if you're a lineman and you need to bulk up and you do take some steroids or you're an all-star wrestling, you
Mhm.
know, you're not playing the game of hockey where you're going up and down, quick turn to the left, quick turn to the right. And maybe you can get away with it, but this guy came and you could tell that he had done steroids, man. You just know just don't look like that, And he's the only guy
Wow.
that I ever knew. But you know what? Right from day one, he had a torn this and a torn muscle and a torn ligament
Ooh.
because again, he grew too fast for the game of hockey. So nobody in hockey that I knew of, and I would say today, would ever get on steroids. And so that was the one thing I noticed at training camp. Somebody a little bit different. He wasn't necessarily overweight, But the other one, I don't know if you know, there was a player that I played with in Montreal. His name was Pierre LaRouche.
I've heard of him.
And if you ever Google, that guy's stats were pretty impressive. So he got drafted by Pittsburgh. He was a French Canadian. That guy scored 50 goals, like I think in the NHL, with 18 teams, and he did it twice. And so he played for Pittsburgh, and he had some good stories. And Pierre was telling me one day there was a guy that played in the National Hockey League. His name was Steve Durbano, and he was actually a first-round draft choice. He was a defenseman, and he was the only guy that I ever saw. He played in the National League, and he was such a lunatic that they wanted him out there, that they actually, the NHL traded him to a team called Birmingham Bulls in the World Hockey for a player the World Hockey had named Vaslav Nedomansky, who used to be the captain of the Czechs national team. Good finesse hockey player. They made the trade. They just wanted Steve out of their league. So, of course, he comes to our league. And it's just like Muhammad Ali says, nobody's afraid of a tough guy, but everybody's afraid of a crazy man. And that was like Durbano. He was still, he's dead now. So I could talk about him because he can't get me. But he was a lunatic. I didn't want to fight the guy because, you beat him up, he's going to spear you in the face next shift. Like, that's just someone I don't want to mess with. And so Pierre was telling me he played on Pittsburgh with him and that they had training camp. And, you're trying to do your very best to impress everybody. Look at the stats I got. And you come in your good body weights. And so he was in there doing a stress test. And he was on the stationary bike. They got all these wires stationed to you. And, you got your head down and you'd be trying your best. So the guys come in around the corner and there's Durbano on his stationary bike, all hooked up to these wires, and he's riding it not very fast, the bike, and he's having a smoke.
You're joking.
He's having a smoke while he's doing his stress test.
No way.
So I just said, that is pretty freaking bizarre, right? And so, just because I'm talking about Durbano, and he also told me, and I'm a gullible guy, but he told me another story that when Broad Street Bullies were around and they had their 4 or 5 top guys, that they were in the old Philadelphia Spectrum.
Yeah.
Durbano's, he was a defenseman, and they had a face-off right kind of in front of the Flyers bench. And sometimes guys will chirp you from the other team's bench, and you just ignore it. Well, somebody was saying something to him, and Durbano thought it was the trainer. So Durbano, now this is, again, Pierre's told me this. You might call bullshit on it. I don't know, but he told me it was true. Durbano heard somebody chirping him. He turned around and he just speared the trainer in the mouth and knocked his teeth out in Philadelphia. Well, the whole bench come over after Durbano. And Durbano, he said, skated down to the other end of the ice and he pushed the goalie out of the net. And he took the nets off its moorings and he pulled it up against the boards so the Flyers couldn't get at him. I said, are you shitting me?
Wow.
Said, nope, that's true story. So take it for what it's worth.
No,
Just because we were talking about Durbano.
I think in today's in today's hockey world, wow. The only instance where I could honestly ever see that happening is the Battle of Alberta between Calgary and Edmonton. And speaking of which, this is why I'm genuinely happy to be talking to you right now, because it's stories like this that makes me think about hockey during that era and what that must have been like.
Yeah.
But I find the story to be believable for this reason, particularly because in the 70s, from everything that I've learned, and I'm a young man, I'm only 29 years old. From everything that I've read, you talk about that was an absolute bloodbath of an era of hockey. You had the big bad Bruins, you had the Broad Street Bullies, and you had those great Montreal teams of the 70s, which you were a part of as well. Now, this season, you have the all-Canadian division, and I know hockey fans in Canada are excited. and I'm eager to get your thoughts on the Canadian division, as well as you're in Edmonton. So you I'm sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, you watch the Oilers quite
Yep,
frequently,
that's right.
and you're like familiar with the Calgary Flames. How much fun is it going to be watching those two teams face off each other 8 times this upcoming season?
Well, you know, the hockey fans are excited. There is questions as to what kind of caliber of hockey, considering I think I heard just today
Mhm.
that tomorrow is Sunday,
Yes. Mhm.
and I don't know what the date is today. What is it? The
The
third,
second. Second.
second. So
Yeah.
on the third, training camp opens.
Correct. That's correct. Mhm.
Okay, so the first game is the 13th. I don't know how much guys have been skating with the pandemic, right? I
Mhm.
don't know if there's ice available and you could rent it yourself. Like, I don't know if they've been on ice. And, I am more excited when the real season comes. They've had the summer to train and they've been skating for the last month and a half
Right.
and they can't wait to get there at training camp. And then you get a week or two of good hard skating and then you start the season. I'm hoping that the season starts off with a bang and it's not like sloppy, not good hockey. Like, I
Mm.
don't know. Like, I don't know. Time will tell because I'm watching the junior games right now that are going on, the World
Yes.
Juniors,
Mhm.
and that's out of Edmonton. And, I felt so bad for like the German team. They had 8 guys with COVID. And so when they took on the mighty Team Canada, who had nobody out, and they had 14 players on the bench, including their extra goalie.
Was that the 16-1 game, by the way?
Yeah, 16-2. That
Oh
was
my
exactly
God.
so.
What?
So here you are, Team Canada powerhouse,
Mhm.
taking on the Germans, who they need every player in the lineup in order to be competitive, and
Right.
they are getting better. The Germans every year they're getting better and better. But when you got 14 players on the bench, I actually changed the channel. Like to me, like to me, I've
Wow.
seen in football where, and I don't know about the NFL, but I know in the Canadian Football League, when one team is kicking the crap out of the other and it's a big score difference,
Yeah.
well, in the last, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever of the game, they start doing more the low percentage. So they don't low percentage play. So they don't rack up the scores, and keep it going and really humiliate the other team. They'll try to maybe hand off up the middle and they try it again. And, they know they're going to win, but they're trying not to humiliate.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not that easy in hockey, but I'm saying to myself when it was 10-1 halfway through the game, I'm saying, come on, guys, don't be doing this to the Germans. Like they only got 14 players,
Mhm.
and so I just thought that the coach could try to get a little bit more creative and some people laugh at me, but you're going to win the game. And so I said, okay. My son said, well, how would you do that? Well, you got to think outside the box. So I would have seriously, I would have, honest to God, it would have made it fun. I would have said to the defense, okay, 3 guys are going on the forward line now. And you put 3 defensemen playing forward. So,
Wow.
if they got some goals scored against them, does it really matter? The goalie gets some extra work from Team Canada. And at the end of the day, you got your 2 points. You've changed the atmosphere for the D, where they always say, man, it's so easy being a forward. And so you put them up there, and it just things you got to get a little more creative. And again, that's just my thoughts. But, going back to your original question, we're excited and it's going to take a while in my mind, and I could be totally wrong, before the real product starts going. And who's to say that COVID's not going to rear its ugly head and all of a sudden
It's a great
there's
point.
teams that have got COVID and we're going to
Yeah.
have to suspend the season for the next 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Like it's going to be a lot of unknowns. My first thoughts were, let's just get this thing defeated first. But I understand also that a lot of the sports teams, restaurants, there's a lot of people hurting financially because of this. And so they're going to do their best to put a product on the ice and hopefully it's going to turn out to be, really good and it's going to be interesting to watch. So, when you get these Canadian teams playing each other, we're all looking forward to seeing the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Montreal Canadiens a lot more because those were the original 2 out of the 6 teams,
Yes.
along with, Boston and
Hmm.
Rangers, Detroit,
Yeah.
and
Chicago.
Chicago. Can't forget Chicago.
Yeah.
And so, it's in Canada when those 2 teams come to town, you can't get a ticket. Toronto or Montreal go on the road, and I remember when I played with Montreal, we would go on the road, and without even trying to be funny, there'd be more people in the stands on our away game wearing Montreal Canadian jerseys
Wow.
than the home team. That happened all the time. So it's going to be really good for the fans. It's going to create a lot of interest, and you know, even though the fans won't be able to go, it's still they're going to be pretty happy getting to see these teams on television.
For sure. And I want to step away from talking about the upcoming season for a bit, which we'll get more into in just a bit. But there was a video that I saw last night that really caught my eye and my attention, and I want to have the opportunity to talk about it with you. And that is you appeared in a video with the Montreal Canadiens on the Montreal Canadiens Twitter site, sending your best wishes to Hockey Hall of Famer Guy Lafleur, who had been dealing with some health issues
He's got
for
lung cancer. He's
yeah,
got lung
he has
cancer.
lung cancer. Wow. And I want to get your thoughts on Guy Lafleur, the teammate, friend, and what he means to you, and as well as his fight with lung cancer right now.
Yeah. You know, in that little clip that you saw,
Yeah.
and I talked about really when I think of Guy Lafleur, I don't think about, he was one of the best hockey players because he was consistent. And when you took on the big bad Bruins, I remember in the playoffs, after playing the Bruins, and they had their tough boys like the O'Reillys and the
Oh yeah.
Winsinks and the Jonathans, and they were at Millbury. And so I'm in the shower with Lafleur, and I see his stomach and his back.
Mm.
I said, "Look at all those welts. How'd you get that?" He goes, "Oh, the Bruins, they spear me and they slash me."
Wow.
And his body, honestly, it had full of marks. Like I noticed it. And the thing that I liked is I remember playing hockey and it got rough out there and somebody would get speared or slashed. And they'd come to the bench and they would say to the coach, "Coach, go get Cam. Tell him to get this guy. He just did this to me." And I used to think, "You coward, man! Why didn't you stick up for yourself? Like, stick up for yourself, like." And so Lafleur, he never. You could do what you needed to do to him, and some guys will slow down, okay, because I'm not going in the corner because they're going to really try to get. He would still play. He wouldn't take a step backwards. He always showed up for the tough games. He went into the corners. He did what he had to do. He'd go in front of the net and he never complained. He'd just get his welts and his spears, and just that's part of the game. And so, I hung around with Guy. He lived near my house in Montreal, and we would travel sometimes to the games together, to the airports when we had our charter flights.
Mm.
And Guy, I played with some hockey players whose names you would recognize, but I won't say their names. Man, you know, they were, if you didn't talk about them and their accomplishments, they would just have nothing to say to you. And when I saw those Montreal Canadian guys, I would say there's 12 of them that are in the Hockey Hall of Fame that
Yeah.
I played with. Those guys were the most modest. They show up. They didn't take a step backwards.
Mm.
And Lafleur, I love the man. I mean, he's probably, and I talk about Gordie Howe, and Gordie was another really good man. But I think, my favorite is Lafleur just because he's modest, his hockey abilities. He was always a happy person, but he did smoke too much. That's well documented. And for example, just because I specifically remember we're taking the Bruins on
Yeah.
in the semifinals, and they're in our rink at the Montreal Forum. And so most guys, if it's a 7:30 game, you arrive to the dressing room anywhere between 5 and 5:30, and you slowly get yourself ready. physically and mentally for the game. Lafleur would be there by 2 in the afternoon, the day of a game. He would put his full gear on, and if you've ever played the game of hockey, you put your skates on, just before you go on the ice because your feet will swell up because you got to do the skates up tight. And back in those days, I can't speak today. You would wear, if you had a shoe size of 10, you would wear a 9 skate. And because your toes would be curled up, your skates would be about a size smaller than your shoe size, and so your feet swell up. And Lafleur would have his skates, everything done up, everything. He's ready to go, right at 2 o'clock, and he'd go into the trainer's room, which was seriously the size of a bedroom, a little bigger than a bedroom in a house, and he would lock the door, and he would sit there until 2 minutes before we had to go on the ice. And then one of the guys would knock on the door, and that was Lafleur's signal. Okay, we're going on the ice. So he had 4 hours, 5 hours just to sit there and think about the game, which is what he did, but he would smoke the whole time. And so when it was time to come out, open the door, and that training room is in our dressing room, our whole dressing room filled with smoke. It just poured out of there. He was smoking the whole time between periods. And he was a nervous guy. He'd go to the bathroom, sit on the toilet, and have a smoke. But that was Guy. That was how he calmed his nerves. And it worked for him, but it caught up to him, right? You do that for a long time, and I guess if you smoke during the season, in the off season, you're not going to quit. So he probably smoked way too much, but he was he was like a thoroughbred, just always high maintenance, and not maintenance, but high strung. High strung, and that kind of kept them grounded and unfortunate. So when I heard this about Guy, honestly, he's one of the finest human beings you will ever meet. Like I said, he never talked bad about people. I just can't say enough about the guy, as you can tell.
Yeah. And I just listening to you talk about your experiences with Guy Lafleur, and as well as like the impact that he's had on you, and share with me one of your favorite memories playing alongside with him, whether it be from a regular season game or during the playoffs as you guys battle together for the Stanley Cup.
Well, I keep talking about Boston. It's not just because that's your neck of the woods.
I mean, because Boston and Montreal, that is the ultimate rivalry in hockey, bar none. Yeah,
it is. And so I missed a little bit of the playoffs, like the last the against the Rangers. We beat them for the Stanley Cup that year. I was there.
79.
But I missed the last game, I believe, against Boston. Because I got food poisoning in Boston, and I got really, really sick.
Wow.
And so I remember watching Lafleur in that game, and I think, and I may be wrong, I think it was game 7 that the Bruins were leading with just a couple minutes to go in the game, and they got too many men on the ice, and it was Don Cherry coaching. And so they were leading, and if they win, they beat us and they move on to the finals. And so they got too many men. And so I'll never forget it. Guy Lafleur's coming down the right wing, and he just gets over the Bruins blue line, and he does a drop pass. Jacques Lemaire was behind him. He still went straight, and Jacques got him the puck, and Guy, a great goal scorer, they can get that puck on and off their stick right away. And that's what he did. And I remember from the angle of the camera, it went the far side on, it wasn't Cheevers. I can't remember the goalie's name. It'll come to Gilles Gilbert. Does that sound right? Gilles?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Like it almost seemed like there was only enough room for the puck to turn on the edge. And it was like, I don't know how it fit in there, but Lafleur thread that needle. It hit the far side, scored, tied it up, and then we won. I think it was in overtime.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, wow. So I said to Guy, did you pick that corner? And he said, no. He said, I just knew where the net was. And that's what goal scorers can do. Like, they've just got some ability that I don't have. And same with Gretzky. And there was a guy named Bernie Nichols that played in LA. These
Mm.
guys can shoot it from every angle, and somehow that puck will find a way in the net. And he had that ability, man. He could put it on the net, and that puck had eyes. It find its own way in that net. And that's the one memory that I'd never forget. How did you put that puck in that little tiny little spot and get it in? And so again, and he had so many goals that he scored, but that was the one. And again, it just happened to be against the Bruins that I remembered the most.
When you talk about goal scorers and you talk about players who have the ability to have that I guess that sense for the net, if you will,
Yeah, that's
and you're the Montreal Canadiens, or the teams that you played on, they had a nose for the open net like very few teams ever did, and I gotta ask you, especially for someone who any player who has a knack for scoring. I'm sure there had been times where you're shooting from like a severe angle or anything like that, and somehow you're able to get the puck in. Like, what type of drills do you do to like work on that particular part of your game? Because I can only imagine, especially if you're facing against an elite goaltender, that's not an easy thing to do.
Well, you're 100% right. And you might think this is a cliche, but I honestly believe it. You know, I know for myself, in the World Hockey one year, I got 35 goals. But, I would stay out all the time late, and I go in and I try to pick the corners, when everybody's gone in and I got an empty net. Man, I got in those corners every single time. And then when you put a freaking goalie in that net, I don't know why I couldn't hit those holes anymore. And and you can practice your shot, you can practice getting it away. And the thing they always said in hockey is just get it on the net. The
Mm,
goalie has to stop it, even if you don't know where it's going. Make him stop it. Get it on the net. Well, I get it on the net, but those other guys, they also seem to shoot more, right? If you look at the guys that are leading the team in points and goals, and they'll show you shots, take a look at their shots on net. Now, it's
mm,
also directly related to they're getting a lot more shifts on the ice than anybody else, too.
yeah.
Okay. But they shoot the puck. Okay, perfect example. I played with Phyllis Mazzito and big old Bruin, and I needed some goals. I had some chances. I wasn't scoring, and Espo always got lots of points, got lots of ice time. And I remember we got a 2-on-1 against the defenseman, and the defenseman, what he's supposed to do on a 2-on-1 is the goalie concentrates on the guy with the puck. That's where his focus is. There's the other guy who you as a defenseman, your job is to make sure that puck doesn't go across to that other guy. Because if the goalie's focusing on the puck and it goes across, the guy's got an open net, right?
Yeah.
And it's not the goalie's fault, it's the defenseman's fault. So here we are. Here is Esposito and I'm in the middle of the ice. He's up against the boards. We get over the blue line in the other team's end. The defenseman rushes Esposito. And I'm going, oh, this is perfect. And I'm waiting for a pass. He takes a wrist shot from the blue line. And I
Wow.
look, catches it. And I remember that, well, that's pretty selfish. And so, you go back to the bench. And so I said, oh, I'll just keep my mouth shut. Because usually you'll see him go, didn't you see me? Right? I just kept my mouth shut. A few shifts later, and then I said, Phil, in that last play, did you see me in the middle of the ice open when the defenseman rushed you? He goes, yeah, but I had a good shot. So I just laughed to myself. Yeah, but that's why they get 50 goals. And you see, the same guys, for the most part, it's not a rule, but it's pretty close. If you get a 2-on-1 with a 50 goal scorer, he's got the puck. You might as well go sit on the bench because he's not passing it. He's not thinking about throwing it across. He's thinking shoot the whole time he's coming down. Whereas I would come down and kind of, okay, is the guy coming at me, the defenseman, is the goalie, is I got something to shoot at? Maybe I made it too complicated. But
Mm.
if I was to do my career again, I have any 2-on-1s. the other guy better go sit in the bench because I'm shooting from now on.
I mean, you talk about when you play with the Rangers, you play with Phil Esposito. I mean, this is a man who he only scored 717 goals. No big deal, right? I mean, but speaking of defensemen, you make this one. I'm quite sure you recall some guy named Larry Robinson, who, without question, is one of the all-time great defensemen to ever play in the National Hockey League. In my book, he's top 10 without question. Not
I
just
agree.
because of this defensive aspect, but in terms of winning the Norris Trophy or anything like that, but because what he could bring offensively as well in the little things. Now, what makes a defenseman elite in terms of his ability to take away those shooting lanes or the shooting angles, and as well as being able to take away those opportunities to make the right pass over to the forward?
You know, those guys that are at that level, it's not an accident that they've made the right choice. You know, they've learned lessons from a little kid up, and they've had some good coaches. And, you know, they've seen that situation before. They don't panic. And, you know, sometimes out there they make the wrong decisions and they realize, man, why did I rush him? I should have waited,
Mm.
you know. But for the most part, you know, you talk about Larry Robinson, he made the right decisions. Like he would know as a defenseman, your job is to keep the puck carrier to the outside. And if the guy wants to shoot the puck from the outside, that's called the low percentage shot.
Mm.
Those goalies will take that all day long. So Larry will give him the outside so the guy thinks he's got some more skating room. And then he takes the skating room away. He's got that long reach. And he doesn't have to necessarily paste you into the boards. He's got that long reach. He sticks it there. And he either knocks the puck off your stick or it deflects and the goalie just catches it. Eh? So that's just from experience. And he had the build for a defenseman. He was long, he was tall. You know, it's like Chara, right? You try to go around
Yeah.
him,
Good luck.
you know, that's just like, you know, like the reach on him. You got to be having a lot of speed with a lot of room to try to get around him. And
Mm.
Larry was along those lines too. He knew how to use his stick and his long arms. He knew the game of hockey and the percentages, and he didn't make the same mistake over and over and over. These guys, they learn what they've done wrong, they learn what they've done right. And Larry had confidence. The coaches all loved him, the players all loved him, and again, he had you know he just learned all his lessons, and he had the tools, and he had the desire. And it's like the rest of the Montreal Canadiens. Man, those guys worked hard in practice, every single one of them. And they're all really nice guys. And so they have in their dressing room, and I don't remember the exact words, but they show somebody holding a torch and
Mm.
with a flame, and it says, "We, the players from the past, pass the torch on to you, the present players, and carry on what we've done." And you know, so when you come into that Canadians dressing room, you read that and you know the history of the Canadians.
Mm.
It means something to you, and you want to carry that torch, and you want to do as well as the predecessors. And so I think Larry, you know, he's done great for himself over the years. And you know, I keep talking about wonderful people. Larry's like that too. He's so down to earth. He grew up on a farm.
Oh.
Larry had the values. If I don't know if you ever met farmers, they're so
Mm.
down to earth and just unassuming. They don't brag about themselves, and that's like Larry. He's got those values of somebody who grew up on a farm.
Speaking of all-time great defensemen, and I'd be remiss if I did not bring this topic up to the table to discuss. Earlier in this podcast, you talked about sometimes like the decisions being made that is out of your hands, so to speak. This week, in fact, just the last few days, the major story in the NHL is surefire future Hall of Fame defenseman Zdeno Chara, now former Boston Bruin and former captain of the team, leaving to go sign with the Washington Capitals on a 1-year, $795,000 contract. Now, as someone who had the decision made for them, so to speak,
Yeah.
And with the Bruins, it seemed as if that situation was decided for him based upon the explanations that came out here in Boston just a few days ago. What are your thoughts on the news of Chara leaving the Boston Bruins after 14 years to go sign with the rival Washington Capitals for less than $1 million?
Well, it's a travesty because he didn't want to leave Boston, number one.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know who the decision maker is in Boston.
Really.
If it's their GM, the president of the team, or is the owners telling them what to do? Because sometimes the owners tell them what to do, and they can't say, "Well, it was not me; it's the owner who's telling me." You can't say it, so they kind of take all the flack. So I don't know who started the "we don't need Chara anymore," but I can honestly say, like, whatever happened to loyalty? Whatever
Great
happened
point.
to, okay?
Yeah.
And so when you get a guy like Chara, who has been, for the most part, a rock back there, he has been like, there's nobody built and like him. He's got a little bit of a mean streak when he wants to, and he's been a plus over the 14 years, more so than a negative, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, I would have said to myself, number one, Chara's not saying, I need 5 million a year, right? He's getting minimum wage. I think there's a ceiling. I'm going to say 700 or 750 or somewhere around there in the NHL. So he's getting minimum wage. And what I read in Edmonton, it said that Chara decided that he was told that he would get minimal ice time. And you know what? When you're a proud warrior and to be sitting on the bench, if you're even dressing, like that hurts you. That hurts you a lot because you've always been a warrior. And now just to sit on the bench, that you got pride. And in my mind, he was cooperating. He was going for the minimum wage. I want to stay here. You would say to him, I would say to him, I wouldn't promise him you're getting it. You're the top 4D. I would say you've been great over the years. Your last season wasn't as good as what we've seen, but you're in tip-top shape. Yeah, you're getting older, but you still have the tools, and we know you're always in great shape. So let's give it, give it your best in the offseason. Come with a new frame of mind. And you know what? We will start you off, and you're going to get a regular shift, and it'll be up to you. How well you do will determine how much ice time you get, rather than just tell them you're not getting much ice time, or you're going to be on the bench, and maybe you might not even dress. Like, that's pretty discouraging. Whereas somebody else is saying, you know what? We recognize for what you've done. We've had to play against you for 14 years. We'd be happy to have you, even if you're not at the old form. We'd be happy because you've also got leadership skills. You've also can mentor some of the young guys on the team, just like you talk about Larry Robinson. Larry would always go talk to the young guys. Doesn't matter if they're going to take his job, he would pass on the knowledge. Chara would be the same way. And so to me, that's a disgrace that they didn't. And again, I could see it if he wants 5 million a year, you can't do it. But him to say, I will do it for minimum wage, you can find a place for him, and you put it on his shoulders. You don't tell him he's going to be, he hasn't even got on the ice to say you're going to get less ice time and this and this and this. We're going to say it's up to you. You're going to start, and only you can get yourself out of that position. And that's all you had to do.
And it's a shame because, like, one of the big things that I've had to wrestle with is this is a man for 14 years was the captain, and he and I feel like Bruin fans, and it really angers me when I go on social media and I read a lot, like not all, but a pretty good chunk of Bruin fan base say, well, he's getting old, he needs to go. Like, it's time for Patrice Bergeron to be the captain. Patrice Bergeron is another surefire Hall of Fame forward, Mr. Selke himself, who's tied Bob Gainey with the most Selkies in NHL history. But you talk about a man who chose to come to Boston, and I'll never forget this. Summer of 2006, Charles, a free agent. Ottawa said, we're not going to bring you back. We're going to give up on you. Sounds like similar to what the New York Islanders did. He said, you know what? We're going to go to Boston. I want to go to Boston. And he immediately demanded the captaincy of that team, took it upon himself to become the leader that he became, to change the culture of a Bruins franchise that I would be honest to say that prior to 07, 08, there was some lean years. Like there were years that the Bruins would lose in the first round. I mean, heck, in 04, they lost to Montreal in the first round. And this was a man that changed the fabric and the culture of that locker room and led the Bruins to the Stanley Cup, led the Bruins back to the Stanley Cup Finals twice. And to me, it was just like, I don't understand for the life of me that there's an old saying that goes in life: you don't know what you have until you don't have it anymore. And I fear
Yeah.
that a lot of the Bruin fans who wanted him to be gone, they're not going to realize exactly how much was lost, not just in terms of the locker room presence, the leadership, but just the little things like penalty kill, shot blocking. You talk about his size and his reach just a little bit earlier in the podcast. And am I fair to say that the loss of Zdeno Chara in Boston cannot be measured based on statistics or any other metrics in hockey?
I've seen it time and time again. There are certain people that they care about your teammates. They will teach you what they've learned over the years. They will take you aside as a rookie. Um, they've got these leadership skills. They're not taught to you. This is how you be a leader. It comes from within. And Chara has been a leader. And you know what bothers me? It's not only in hockey, in sports, it's even in the 9 to 5 world. The word loyalty, it always seems like it's a one-way street for loyalty. They
Mm.
all say, you be loyal to us, you be loyal. And what happens when Chara maybe needs a little bit of loyalty and think about what I've done and what I think I can do? We're going to take a chance on you, buddy, because you've been with us all these years. You deserve it. Like, what did they do? The first chance they say, okay, you're out of here, buddy. Like, what happened to the word loyalty? Right?
It's a shame.
Yeah.
And it's become a dying trait
Yeah.
these days,
Yeah.
especially like as you mentioned in life and as well as in sports. And like it's going to be awfully strange to see Zdeno Chara in a Washington Capitals uniform. I've already seen the photos like of the Capitals uniform being photoshopped on Chara's body, and I'm just like, no, just
Yeah. No.
it's just a sore for sight type of deal.
Chara's not the guy that says, you guys didn't give me enough ice time or respect last year. I want out of here. It wasn't anything like that at
At
all.
all.
He was more than happy to let's do another year. I'll just do a 1 year deal. I don't need a 2 or 3 year. Give me a 1 year deal at minimum wage. I want to come back and I want to prove to you. And then what you could have done is, you give him his best chance, and maybe he had a great season and it was wild, and maybe it wasn't so good, but you didn't lose financially. You could always bring somebody else up from the system,
Mm-hmm.
and Chara could work with him before practice and after practice to try to pass on some of the knowledge and skills. And then I would have, again, that word loyalty means a lot to me. Some organizations, they're players that have been with them a long time, they keep them in the organization. And a guy
Mm.
like Chara, I would have said to him, you know what, let's give her our best shot this year. And when your career is over, we want you in this organization. And, it could be on ice. We'll talk about it when the year's over. But we want you. And I just think that goes a long way, to an organization, to the players, to the people that work in the front office. It's all about loyalty, and it's not just you better be loyal to us.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta. It's a two-way street, buddy, right? And they didn't do that with Chara.
And I think that in itself, it's going. I feel like it's going to impact the organization one way or another. And I feel like the players who have already reported to Warrior Ice Arena that they're feeling the loss on some level, and I feel like they're not going to feel it fully entirely immediately, but once the season gets going and in about 11 and for the Bruins 12 days from now, that the impact of the loss of Chara is going to be felt because again, like 14 years, and you've been the staple of the organization. You talk about the core, like Bergeron. Bergeron is Mr. Bruin. Like he's been here since 2003. But you talk about the guys that have won the cup together, like David Krejci, Brad Marchand, Zdeno Chara, Patrice Bergeron, and now Chara's gone. And although Tuukka Rask was on the team that when they won the cup, but he was a backup to Tim Thomas. However, I feel that going into this season, as far as the Bruins is concerned, there was a comment that was made. Well, there's talent. There's talent in terms of the young kids and so forth. And I'm saying, well, would you like to show me who? Because I have concerns because now, mind you, the Bruins lost Torrey Krug earlier this offseason to free agency. He went to go sign with the St. Louis Blues. And now you lose Charles. So now you have two big gaping holes on the left side of your defense. And I want to ask you, how important is it to have a good, solid left-handed shot defenseman to go along with the right side, in which that the Bruins seem to be lacking right now? The best pairing for the Bruins defensively is Charlie McAvoy and as well the left-handed shot Matt Grzelcyk.
Yeah, to me, I mean, there's advantages playing, being a left-handed shot and a right-handed shot. And I'm not so sure about defense. I know when I shot left, but my best years in hindsight was when I played right wing shooting left.
Wow.
There's a lot of advantages coming in because somebody throws the puck to me, I'm coming off the right wing, throws from behind the net. I'm on my forehand right off the bat. I don't have to stop the puck. And it's probably the same with the defenseman. Your stick is pointing to the middle. You got more of the net you're looking at, more chance for deflections. So to me, and again, I'm not a coach, and so I haven't walked in those shoes and I haven't analyzed it. But in my mind, I want the best 4, 5, 6 defensemen. I don't care, if you're all left-handed, okay. Maybe I can see there's going to be a disadvantage, and I do my best to find a right-hander or somebody. But to me, and again, I'm not saying I'm right. I just want the best hockey players that are out there. And just about Chara, one more thing is that okay, he's getting older. We all know that. We do know it's legendary the kind of conditioning he keeps himself in.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, it's a shortened season. You're not talking 82 plus 4 rounds of playoffs. What is it? 56 games? 56.
Yep.
Okay, so right away there's 15, 16 games less that he has to play, which maybe works out to one less game a week. And if you were worried about his age, okay, well, maybe you give him a day off a little bit more than you have in the past. Like there's ways you can work with him, and especially with a shortened season, that works for him versus a long, long season. Like I said, when we won the cup, we played 116 games. So Chara already is 16 games less starting, right?
Yeah.
That's got to work for him. So, anyways, I'm not even a Bruins fan, and I'm sour.
Which tells me an awful lot, considering that, like, there's just his impact alone on the sport in terms of what he brings and his story of the fact that he was drafted by the Islanders and so forth. It was just a tremendous loss in terms of for the Bruins and for the city of Boston, but as well as for in terms of not for the NHL, because he's still playing in the league right now with the Capitals, but just the change in itself was felt. Because in fact, I listened to Hockey Central on the Sportsnet radio network, and I remember they led off the show talking about that. I'm talking about Chara going to Washington, and Brian Burke, who I absolutely love and respect his opinion, being a former general manager and a Stanley Cup winning general manager at that. You just talking about, like, that is one of the few instances where you absolutely hate to be a decision maker, because this isn't some bottom pairing or 23rd guy on the roster that we're talking about. We're talking about a surefire Hall of Famer, a guy who single-handedly, in many people's eyes, including myself, and I'm not saying this guy's a Bruins fan, single-handedly may have been the most impactful NHL free agent signing ever.
Well, what else? again, we're talking about Chara. You know, when we do have meetings about the other teams when you're playing pro, you know, you didn't like I can't speak about today, but sometimes you had some big games and the coach would say, okay, get into the dressing room early. We're going to go over their lineups and let's talk about this team we're playing tonight. And they would say, well, you know what? When we look at their defensive, squad that's out there, try to go over to this guy's side because he doesn't turn very well. And he's slow. Go to that side. You never would hear that. Go to Chara's side, okay?
No.
Even if he's older, they would never say go to Chara's side because it's really, really hard to get by that guy. Like it's really hard. So he made some mistakes, and sometimes they just happen, man. You play enough hockey, you're going to make mistakes. That's just how it is. So to me, it was ill thought out. And this guy, when he loves Boston, and so he comes back to Boston. You think the fans are going to give him a standing O?
I would hope so. That's if there's fans in the in the
That's a
stands.
good point. Yeah, I take that back. But I think you would see nothing but positive press clippings
Without question.
with him coming back. And for sure, the reporters would be phoning him in his hotel room. Like he's made an impact on that city, and just to cast him away in the time of his need, I don't like that.
Yeah, neither do I. And just I got a couple of questions left. Now, in terms
Yeah,
of the upcoming season, 56 games, and the way that it's formatted, basically, it's going to be teams that's going to be going up against each other in a ferocious battle every
yeah,
single night. I mean,
yeah.
you look at the North Division, the Canadian division. We talked about this earlier in the podcast. We also look at in stateside. You look at the East. You look at the West and all that fun stuff. Is there a specific division that you look at and you say that you know what I'm most excited to see battle head to head on a nightly basis, given that these teams they're going to be playing a lot of back to backs.
Well, I would say that with the parity today, everybody's got the salary cap. And I remember years ago, Chicago Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup. They had an unbelievably talented team. They had to take that team apart because of the salary cap, right? And so most of the teams, there's always a couple shitty teams, but even like a Buffalo is improved, right?
Mm-hmm.
These teams are all pretty well evenly matched. And so to me, let's see what the products are this year, what they've worked on, if they did any free agent signings. And I just think that the parity it's great. Most teams are any given night, they can win, they can lose. And so to me, I just think that each divisions, as it moves along, you could say then, at least I will, I'll say, now that is an exciting division. Did you just see the stats and what happened? And so to me, as much as I'm unsure about what the season's going to bring as far as on ice, there's still those guys are trying to win once the puck's dropped. So I'm hoping it doesn't take away, from the product on the ice. And I just think as this game starts, especially early in the season, there should be a lot of traditionally, just like when everything was normal, and I get to go to a game. If I have to buy tickets, they're too expensive for me. But if I have to buy tickets, I realized I would buy tickets the second half of the year. The first half of the year, they're getting the kinks out, the conditioning, the timing. There's a lot of factors in there. The second half of the year, everything's a lot more clear and crisper on the ice. And so I just think that you need that first 20 games or so to kind of tweak things. And then once the season really starts going after that, then it's going to unfold what we got.
I'm
So
telling
I
it's
can't say there's any division that I can hardly wait. I just need it to unfold and let's see what we got.
it's going to be really fascinating to watch, especially when you see that a lot of the players they're going to be working on getting rust off. And the interesting part of this format is that there is no preseason games. But just like there wasn't any preseason games during the 2012-13 lockout shortened season as well. And last question I'll ask you, and this is, and I'm sure this is going to be a question that's going to get asked a lot, especially whether it be in around the NHL or especially even in Canada. Do you see this year finally being the year that a Canadian team hoists the Stanley Cup for the first time since 1993? And what team, in your opinion, has the best chance of doing that based on what you've seen on what they've accomplished in the offseason?
Are you talking about NHL wide? Like who's going
NHL.
to end up winning the cup? Well,
Like
it was. Go ahead.
no, in terms of like which do you think a Canadian team will
Yeah.
win the cup this year? And if so, which team do you think?
You know what? I could tell you, being Canadian, and like, was it the early '80s the last time a Canadian team won? Like
1993 Montreal Canadiens.
'93.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that's they. We always say in Canada, it's in the papers. When are we going to get somebody that's into any team that's going to go farther? And you say, okay, well, we got 6 teams in the playoffs. Okay, well, we got 3 now. Oh, okay, we don't have anybody, right? Every year, that's what it is. And so, you go into it by, wow, look at Toronto's lineup. Man, they've got a lot of real good players. Edmonton, they got Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. And, you look for those positives. I would like to say, yeah, I think that Edmonton, Toronto, they're going to do it this year. I really think they're going to do it. In reality, I just haven't seen any one team make that huge adjustment. And now they've really added some key players. And I've always said this. Usually the teams that win the cup, their goaltending is second to none.
Yeah.
You've got to have good goalies. You have to. Because there's times like when I play with Montreal, we know that as a forward, if you make a mistake, well, we have our great defensemen with Montreal Canadiens, the Serge Sabards, Guy Lafleur, Larry Robinson, like those guys. Rod Langway was there, right? We had great defensemen. You said, well, we make mistakes as a forward, they can't get by our D, man. We got great D. Well, if they got by D, we had Ken Dryden in the net. And we'd say, they're not going to beat Kenny. And Kenny, so many times, he won the game himself for us. When some nights you always try your best, but some nights you're a little flatter than others. Kenny would keep us in the game. And his track record, even before I got there, he was a great goalie. He had his moments when he, wasn't playing quite up to par. But overall, you knew, Kenny would stop the puck. And so to me, it boils down to what goalies. Remember Jonathan Quick, how well he used to do, and then you couldn't get a puck by that guy. And the Kings won the Stanley Cup, and then Jonathan, he's not as good as he used to be in net. It kind of caught up to him, and the Kings aren't playing very well either. And so, to me, last year, I predicted that Tampa Bay was going to win.
You're right.
Even in the first half of the season, the first 2 or 3 months, they sucked. They were way down there. And my son, we did a podcast, and he said, Dad, you can change your mind now. It doesn't look like Tampa Bay is going to do too much this season. And I was tempted to switch. I said, you know what, Chris, I'm going to stick with Tampa Bay. And you know what? They got their act together. Goalie stopped pucks, scorers started to score. Defense did their job, and they ended up winning. So I don't know. I haven't been able to follow, other than Chara, who's really, and also I know that Buffalo has made a couple key acquisitions. I really don't know the movement of the players and who's surfacing where, and maybe some of the draft choices that were picked, how they're going to make an impact or not. So if Tampa Bay hasn't changed their lineup too much, probably I'm going to go out there and thinking they could do it again.
The only major loss that I would say that they've sustained is the loss of Nikita Kucherov. He had surgery on his hip, and that's a big loss, especially considering just how much firepower the Tampa Bay Lightning offense had with him in the lineup. I mean, you talk about with him and Stamkos, he's returning back healthy.
Okay.
And you also you look at Braden Point as well. So I mean, the loss of Kucherov for the season is going to be a big blow, but that team hasn't had a whole lot of roster turnover. I mean,
Okay.
Zach Bogosian is gone, but that team is still very much at the top of my list in terms of teams that could very well win the Stanley Cup this year.
Well, that Russian you just said, he could score goals.
Oh, absolutely.
Like
Yeah.
he could score. He's like we were talking about. There's some guys that have that ability. They get the puck on net. Doesn't matter if it goes off a defenseman's shin pad. It
Mhm.
goes in the net. They got that ability. I don't know how you could. And so they won the Stanley Cup without Steven Stamkos,
Mhm.
right? So Kucherov, he scored the goals. Now he's not there. Stamkos is coming back. Maybe, just maybe, they won it without him, and maybe with because Stamkos is a great, great hockey player.
Absolutely.
Maybe, just maybe, our draft choices kind of goes and helps a little bit more. But they got enough firepower. It's just like in Montreal, we had enough firepower that if one of the goal scorers got hurt, there was somebody else that would step up. Like we just had it there, and that's maybe what I'm thinking that Tampa Bay. I mean, they'd be better with Khrushchev, but without him, they may have somebody in the lineup that'll step up.
It's been a pleasure to have you back on the podcast with you today, Mr. Cam Connor. And listen, happy New Year to you and your family. Stay safe, stay healthy, and for sure, I most certainly look forward to talking with you
Yep.
again. Like once the season commences and we actually have a better idea as to like what team is doing well this upcoming NHL season.
Well, thank you very much for the call. It's always a pleasure talking to you. You're a professional, and
Thank you.
we'll look forward to talking to you again.
Absolutely, my pleasure.